Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to today's seminar on safety, productivity and profit, real-world impacts of AI on road safety. It's great to see so many of you here and a pleasure to host a forum where we chart the course for the future of fleet safety. I'm Kristin Hodgkinson, Senior Marketing Manager at Lytx, with a passion for road safety, security and sustainability, founder of FNOR, and I'll be your moderator for this session. Today is focused on real-world applications, tangible outcomes, and the measurable impact of AI-powered technology in preventing accidents and fostering a culture of safety and efficiency. As we proceed, I encourage you to engage, question, and envision how these insights can help you to transform your operations. We have time set aside for Q&A, where we can answer your questions, and we will be available in the speakers area to the left-hand side outside, straight after. We're joined by a panel where each member is a leader of AI road safety in their own way. From Geotab, we have Oliver Holt, Sales Manager for UK and Ireland, with insights on how telematics and connected data can improve fleet performance. Representing Lytx, Damien Penny, the Vice President for EMEA, brings cutting-edge insights into video telematics and its pivotal role in enhancing driver behavior and safety. And from PepsiCo, Daniel McGuigan, the Environmental Health and Safety Director of Global Operations, will share invaluable perspectives on operationalizing these technologies to achieve improvements in safety performance and insurance outcomes. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, everyone.
Before we get started, a quick show of hands, please. Who here manages or operates a fleet of over 10 vehicles? So 10 vehicles or more. Super, okay. 50 vehicles or more? Keep your hands raised. Fantastic. 100? Okay, brilliant. And 500? Oh, we've got a few large fleets in the room, fantastic. So clearly a diverse group, yet the challenges in safety and efficiency are universal for any scale of fleet. And just out of curiosity, anyone here managing more than 80,000 vehicles? Like one of our panelists? Well, you'll definitely want to hear what Daniel has to say about handling a fleet that could populate a town the size of Burnley. And as a Lancashire lass, I think that's pretty impressive. So, we're going to try to get to grips with the real-world impact of AI on road safety. So let's get started with our first question. Daniel, over to you. I believe PepsiCo's products are distributed in more than 200 countries. How does road safety in the UK compare to other countries?
Huge difference between what we see in the UK and what we see across the globe. We have many concerns about our road systems, but effectively it's quite mature. We have reasonable discipline on roads. Totally different situation when you get to the likes of Mexico or into Egypt, where you're moving from dirt tracks essentially onto some of the most pristine highways, yet there's absolutely no discipline for the drivers in terms of lane discipline. They'll weave across the road wherever their fancy takes them. Very different way to driving to what we have. Road safety culture in a lot of countries we work in is just totally different. The culture of acceptance of speed in Spain, for example, is totally different to the way we would think about it. Same sort of thing when you go over across to Poland. And then you go to the US, and you've got undertaking heavy goods vehicles going at speed beside you, which would be completely alien to us here, but it's just the norm there. So we deal with all sorts of shapes and sizes of vehicles and all different cultures, and we're fairly lucky here from my own experience.
And from your experience so far, prior to artificial intelligence, what role has technology had in improving safety so far to this moment in time?
Yes, before we had the AI technology in our vehicles, we had your normal bog standard telematics that we would talk about with Geotab. That has helped us to understand what's going on with our vehicles, not only from a safety perspective, but also from a vehicle efficiency and fuel efficiency perspective. So you can manage some of the elements of road safety through that technology, but it doesn't give you the whole picture. So AI gives us the opportunity to understand much more what's going on, and we're looking forward to continuing to see that development, and we'll talk a bit more about that as we go through.
Yeah, that's perfect. Perfect segue, and thank you for those insights. So, Oliver, turning to you, AI is undoubtedly making waves this year. Can you explain what the introduction of AI into telematics really means for us?
Yeah, I think primarily the main driver for the telematics side of things, specifically vehicle side, is going to be time to insight. So I think over the years, telematics has come on a long way. We've discovered how to get so much more data from a vehicle. But data's nothing without insight. So helping fleet managers gain that insight in a shorter amount of time and reducing the time it takes is how artificial intelligence on the my Geotab platform is going to be pivotal.
So building on that, Damien, we had a chat just a little earlier, and time to insight is one approach to this kind of data, but you had a different perspective on this.
Well, yeah, I do. I want to sort of touch on the concept of time to action, and I'll go into that in a few seconds. I think from an AI perspective, and it's interesting, PepsiCo have been using video with telematics for a long time and getting a lot of benefits from that. In actual fact, Lytx have been using AI, we called it machine vision, artificial intelligence, way back in 2015. I think the thing that's really changed is the way in which people are applying that technology now. And so perhaps before it was being used to analyze post-incident or maybe look at it on a report on a weekly basis. And AI is great at crunching tons of data and coming up with some really good insights. But the time to action really is about giving the knowledge to the drivers who are the most important technology in a vehicle after all. And so giving the knowledge to the drivers, AI now enables the drivers to make a decision in the moment when there is a risk associated in and around the vehicle. So the AI now has really allowed companies to push tools to the drivers and get that time to action, which means that risk doesn't happen because they're made aware of something happening before it actually occurs. And I think that's a massive shift with this big interest in AI in the last sort of 18 months.
And that's where you see, so video being that critical addition to telematics, the introduction of AI, further adding to the opportunity to prevent incidents, not just be reactive to them.
Yeah, I think it's sort of getting more proactive. So giving and pushing that to where it matters, which is inside the cab, 2 seconds before something happens. And that's what AI can really do. So it can both do great analysis of huge amounts of data and come up with nuggets that you've never seen before, but it also can allow you to push tools to the drivers so they make decisions immediately before that risk occurs.
Perfect. And great segue, Daniel, into my next question, which was talking around that deployment of AI-powered technology and video telematics into your fleet. So what encouraged you to make that decision, and what benefits are you seeing so far?
Yeah, so we've, again, had standard cameras and standard telematics for a number of years across different countries. And that allows you, as Damien was saying, to look at an event and understand some of what's going on. The big push from my perspective was to understand what was the driver doing in that situation. What could we gain from having more understanding of our own actions in terms of being able to prevent future events from occurring? A real big driver as well was how could we utilize the technology to, again, prevent the event from occurring in the first place? Was it fatigue related? Was it something that we should have or could have picked up either through our pre-assessment of the driver, our initial briefings, or from the camera itself telling us this driver's fatigued, get him to pull over. So that's the sort of thing we've been doing with what we call our control tower in Emesa, so based out of Cairo, looking after our vehicles, so 4,000 vehicles across Egypt and South Africa. And they are not observing 24 hours. What they are doing is anytime there's an event triggered by the camera, it then gets reviewed by an individual who determines whether or not it's valid. Because sometimes there may be cases, a driver sitting with his hand on his face may be picked up as a phone, for example. But the individual can validate that that is not an event that has to be investigated and can delete that from the system. But if it is a driver who is fatigued, for example, we can then send a message, automated message through the vehicle to tell the driver to pull over. The individual can observe to make sure that driver does pull over, and has a 15-minute break before they carry on the rest of their journey. There's no two-way communication. It's not about distraction. It's about simply preventing that driver from getting to a situation where they are in a fatigue-related collision.
And I suppose what it does also is then it identifies, yes, there's fatigue going on, potential fatigue happening, but then it allows you as a company to find out, well, why is there fatigue happening? It's not just, oh, we've identified fatigue, tick, we'll try and make sure they don't do that again. It's why, and what happens behind all of that that leads to the driver being drowsy in the first place.
Absolutely. Have they not had sufficient break time? Have they not been taking the daily breaks between shifts? So have we applied our own policies and procedures? Is the route too long? Is there no effective place for them to take a break on that route? Do they need to think about how they reschedule? So there's lots of organizational things we can do based on the data that's coming back to us.
It's an interesting insight just in terms of it not being a technology that you're implementing into your fleet, to the drivers, into those vehicles. It's a culture of safety. There's a different mindset. There's a very different approach to that, to be able to empower the drivers, support them, protect them, prevent these incidents from happening. And of course, they'll have impacts to ROI and maybe more cost efficiencies, maintenance. But it's a culture of safety that I'm sort of picking up that you're talking about there.
Absolutely. We have a global defensive driver training program, and we utilize the technology to ensure that our drivers are adopting those 10 tips, as we call them. So our test drive program, 10 easy safety tips. If we can see that our drivers aren't adopting them through the technology, we can coach our drivers with the footage of themselves, which is a very powerful tool. If you haven't got that technology, if you haven't got that imagery, you're trying to explain to somebody what they may have done, and they're not necessarily going to accept it. But if they can see themselves doing something that you've asked them not to do, then that can be very, very, very powerful.
Do you have any examples of some of the things that you've seen happening that you can share?
Yes, so without naming any names or going into too much detail, we did have a driver who was, according to our normal telematics, a safe driver. Never been in the red, always been in the green, nothing to worry about. So we put the cameras in, and we always have a period where we gather data without doing anything with it. We identified that this driver was driving along, holding his sandwich box, or his fruit bowl actually it was, and eating a bowl of fruit, so a nice healthy snack, but driving with his knees. Yet he's a perfectly safe driver in accordance to standard telematics. So you get much more insight from the video telematics than you do necessarily from the standard telematics. But using them both together helps us not only in collision investigations or in event classifications, it helps us to push our drivers to improve their performance and to help coach them.
I think just a point on that is that you mentioned training, and I think training is critical. You know, it's a regular thing. Coaching, which is, you talked about coaching once you'd seen the videos to just make them realize what's happening in the vehicle. But then the AI now gives them the opportunity to coach the driver. So the AI is another set of eyes inside the van or inside the vehicle or the truck to help them identify risk, whether it be risk they're creating themselves or risk around the vehicle at the same time. So you've got 3 levels of training or coaching, if you like, now with AI.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to hear how that's impacted operations for sure, but also thinking, Oliver, if we can try and build on that further, does PepsiCo's experience resonate with other customers and what they've said about this type of technology?
Absolutely. We see one really critical factor when we're introducing sort of AI, especially video, into fleets, and that's any scale, whether it's sort of on the PepsiCo side of things or the 5 vehicles operating locally to Birmingham, and that's introducing the technology to the drivers in the appropriate way and getting the messaging and the communication right. So an interesting question I had for Daniel was obviously really successful training program today, which we can maybe go into more detail about in a second, but how about the introduction of that? How was that managed with the drivers and the people in the cabs? Were there any challenges you faced?
Yeah, absolutely. Introducing new technology of any type is always a challenge, and to work with the driver population and their unions, where we have unionization, is really important to make them understand why we want to introduce it in the first place, what we're trying to overcome or prevent, but what it's going to mean to them in real life, and what we're going to do with that information. And there needs to be a positive and a negative element to that. You know, we don't want this to come in as a big stick to beat our drivers with, because our drivers are representatives on the road, and they are generally trying to do a very good job. What we want to do is reward them when we have evidence of good practice, and coach them when we've got evidence of not meeting the standards that we want them to achieve. Disciplinary action should be an absolutely a last resort. And my suggestion and recommendation to our business as we went through this was that we start with a reward and recognition program first and link it to those that are already existing in the business. That doesn't need to necessarily be monetary rewards for drivers who drive well. We expect our drivers to drive well. What we want to do is to make sure that we encourage all of them to drive even better and reduce that risk. So it could be things that we had a system where the drivers who were the top performers in the months leading up to the end of the first half of the year were the first who were able to book their summer holidays or their Christmas holidays. So there's no monetary reward for that, but they get to spend more quality time with their family at the time they want to, as opposed to the driver who's at the bottom of the scoreboard, who's the one who we want to see him improve. We want him to want to achieve the improvement. So systems like that can work just as well as monetary reward.
I find that really fascinating just because there's lots of different motivators for people. Sometimes, like you say, people are money motivated, sometimes it's career, sometimes there's lots of different factors. And to be able to sort of tap into that really focuses on the well-being of the driver, fostering that sense of culture, but also that supportiveness within a business as large as PepsiCo, that we really care about our drivers, and to demonstrate that, we're putting these programs in place to give you the options that you need so that you feel empowered, you feel supported, and we're going to look after you as best as we can.
I think there's also an element you have to give your drivers the opportunity to ask you questions. It's not about delivering a system to them. They have to have the opportunity to question it. They really need to understand. As well as that, the people who you're expecting to manage those drivers really need to understand what they're supposed to do with that data that comes back out. It's great having lots of information. If you do nothing with it, it's useless. You really have to utilize that information, and you have to use it properly and fairly, so everybody sees that you are being firm but fair, if you like.
Fantastic. Damien, over to you. Technology is almost always only as good as the people that use it. We talked a lot about drivers, so how does telematics enhance driver behavior from a video perspective? Can it actually make the road safer and prevent incidents?
Well, video telematics has been used for a long time, and I mean, there's millions of vehicles around the world using this technology. And there's only a few that are using it either because they've been told to by the insurance company or because they want to watch the drivers 24/7 do what they shouldn't be doing. That's usually not the case. The majority of the cases is because they know it works, that they know that it allows the drivers to get home safe, more likely to get home safe every night. And so there's a lot of evidence out there that shows significant reductions in risk and severity. I don't know if anybody got to see a presentation yesterday on insurance. Simon Dix from Lytx was talking, and he worked on with an insurance company for a year on a fleet, a relatively small fleet, less than 100, that implemented this technology, and it had a lot of risk, this fleet did. And after a year, they did the pre and post, and it was something like a 66% reduction in the number of claims that are coming from this fleet, an 83% reduction in the cost of the claims. And I think the insurance company also saw a reduction in their loss ratios by about 80%. So it's significant changes can actually happen if you get this technology in. However, it's not just, as Daniel was saying, it's not just about just shoving something on a dashboard or on the windshield. It takes time to communicate what this technology does, but more importantly, what it doesn't do, and get the buy-in from the drivers so they can see that when the AI kicks in, it's because it really does believe there's a risk, and so action should be taken. You know, there's plenty of other examples out there, but there's no doubt that this technology does help change behavior in the moment, which I was saying earlier on.
So whether you're talking about driver mindset, maybe fleet mindset, do you feel like there's a good level of knowledge around the industry at the moment around video? Because there's a lot of different video options out there. There's lots of different artificial intelligence. Do you feel like there's a good level in the market at the moment, or do you think that there's more to be done to help take people on that journey?
Well, if you walk around the outside there, you'll see plenty of examples of video-type technology. So there's lots of technology for all different tastes. I think you just have to decide when you're going into a project, I believe, and Daniel, I'm sure, can help on this, is you have to decide what you're going to use the technology for. You shouldn't be going for this big bang and try and shove everything down everybody's throats all at once, because you're doomed for failure. Identify small amounts of things that you can do really well and use that technology and then build from there. Often technology products fail because you're trying to do everything. You haven't communicated effectively, as you were saying earlier on. So you've got to really take your time when you implement this type of technology. You've got to communicate really well. And I think focusing on a few things that can have the biggest impact is the way forward. I don't know if you agree with some of that.
I would certainly agree with that, and I think we, like everybody else, can make mistakes, and we did that with our initial rollout of telematics because we didn't know exactly what we were going to do with the information at the time. So we allowed our different sectors to have a bit of autonomy in terms of what they introduced. The result from that is that we haven't got comparable data across each of our sectors. So from a global perspective, I can't necessarily compare our fleet in Africa against our fleet in North America. But the senior directors for safety do want to be able to compare that. So what we're working with our partners now on is how do we actually not take a step back, but utilize all of the data coming in to provide a different view of that information, which allows them to compare, regardless of whether or not there are restrictions in any of the jurisdictions about whether or not you can use mapping data or whether you've got a different trigger point. Take the raw data and look at it in a slightly different way and present it to them in a way that's meaningful, but allows them to compare against internal stakeholders as well as external. So I would very much say that you need to ensure that if you've got different fleets or different sizes of vehicles, or you're about to acquire another fleet that has a different telematics provider, that you balance what you're doing and you understand that you need to try and find a consistent approach to what you're collecting, what you're going to do with it, and how you're going to present it across to different stakeholders.
Okay. Clear goals, clear defined next steps with what to do with that data. Obviously, communication being very, very key to drivers and also internal buying as well. Different departments have different stakes in technology like this. I know we were discussing earlier, there's different opportunities from legal teams or HR teams through to the fleet managers themselves. There's so many different people that have stakeholders. How do you navigate something like that in your sort of daily role?
It's a challenge, to say the least, particularly when you look at different sectors. You've got some where you may have objections from a legal perspective with data privacy. We've got GDPR that we need to think about, but when you look at that from data privacy in South America, each country is very different about what they will and won't let you to do. We have HR objections for the same or similar reasons in some European countries. So while some of our European countries are very happy to allow us to roll out AI-based technologies and inward-facing cameras, others are more reticent because their own jurisdiction doesn't allow it. So we face challenges from that. We also face challenges from some of the unions. But we try to work with the various departments, the various teams within our own business to help them to understand what we're trying to achieve. We're not trying to introduce technology for the sake of having technology. We're trying to reduce risk. We're trying to protect life, that of our employees and that of everybody else who's affected by our drivers on the road. And that is a massive challenge for us. We talked about wanting our drivers to get home safely. We want everybody who comes in to the proximity of our vehicle to go home safely, whether that's a consumer, a customer, a member of the public, another driver. One of the key focuses of our AHS team globally is not only to make sure everyone goes home safely, it's to go home better. We have this idea of, we're pursuing positive, we're going beyond zero. We don't want to just stay static. We want to improve the health and well-being of our people. We want to make sure when they finish their shift driving, they actually feel better than they did when they arrived. It's a challenge, but it's our goal.
Brilliant. So thinking in terms of, we touched on insurance before, so as well as reducing incidents within your role, Daniel, how has video telematics translated into reducing insurance costs?
Yeah, so we have different setouts across the globe. We have some places where we self-insure, some where we have insurance through some of our partners. The biggest thing for us is seeing how the video telematics has helped us to reduce the number of events that we're having. So if I go back to the idea of Africa, where we have the control tower, between 2021 when we introduced the control tower and 2022, we saw an 80% reduction in the number of events that were being highlighted by the cameras. That translated to 1 million pounds worth of savings, so $1.3 million worth of savings in a fleet of 4,000 vehicles. In addition to that, and I'm slightly off the insurance topic here, but in addition to that, from a fuel efficiency perspective, by reducing idling, we were able to save a further £100,000. So there are significant savings, even with a small part of our fleet, that we're able to introduce because we have the data and we're using it effectively. When it comes to our insurers, we have a global agreement with AXA for the countries where we do not self-insure, and we work closely with them to balance the offset that we have from the countries where we're saving money from using the telematics to help us to build road safety improvement programs in the countries where we haven't yet rolled that out. So we try to balance the premiums. So we don't necessarily see a huge decrease globally, but what we do see is an improvement in the areas where the risk has been higher previously. So then we utilize that. We do often see a saving anyway, but we've got a massive fleet across the globe that we would struggle to say necessarily the UK has seen X amount of saving. It will be there, but the way our system works is we try to balance that and improve other areas that are not performing as well.
If we can drop into that a little bit further, and question to the group, which is thinking about some of the measurable outcomes, and I think, Daniel, there's a few more examples that you've shared there, but with the adoption of these type of technologies, what can some of the KPIs, ROI, anything else that fleets have seen or that you've experienced?
Yeah, I can say that one. So we've recently done a case study with a customer who we signed up in Spain on the island of Ibiza, which is a nice place to be driving around. And through the implementation of the combined solution together, they saw, well, initially 20% fuel savings. So it's not just the safety side of things, but 20% fuel savings, as well as a 10% on-road incident rate decline. So really positive results from that one particular customer of a sort of medium-sized scale. You got any?
Well, I mean, I gave some numbers earlier on. I think there's another element here is I think the technology now is gaining quite a bit of trust with different communities in the business. So, for example, I've seen plenty of discussions and meetings with drivers who originally had been very skeptical about what this technology would be looking to try and do. And probably 10 years ago, quite rightly, it was just monitoring, and then just you had a long walk down to the manager's office, to have a chat about a video. But that's not the case now. I think it's flipped again, like I said at the very start. It's where I think companies have a corporate responsibility to protect all of their employees, and this type of technology, providing a tool to the drivers to take ownership for their own safety, is seen as a real differentiator, and that trust element has come into the organizations, I think. Very difficult to measure, of course. I mean, it's easy to me to say 66% and 83%, etc. But that is what I've seen when I've talked to companies about the benefits of this type of technology, and I think that's important.
So, Daniel, earlier you mentioned the data collection and that sort of benchmarking phase. So, understanding where you're coming from, setting those clear goals, and then being able to sort of build programs that then support ways to achieve those goals. Because there's all sorts of different stats that we've talked about today, including insurance reduction, obviously potentially driver well-being. I'd expect some driver retention potentially in there as well. The direct cost in terms of the investment of the technology, but the ecosystem that sits around that, from the insurance cost to the bent metal through to all sorts of sort of other costs that might be as a result of preventing those incidents and looking after those drivers.
Yeah, I mean, not directly from an insurance perspective, but when we look at collision investigation, we spend a fortune on investigating incidents, and particularly in the US, sending lawyers out to knock on doors to get CCTV footage from businesses to try and understand what went on. And then you've got the litigation element of that. So to have the technology which allows you to remove those costs from your business and to settle claims quicker, whichever way they go, whether it's an at fault or not fault, all of those things are incredibly beneficial and reduce the amount of time you're wasting investigating collisions. If you can reduce the number of collisions, you just save time. Yeah. And there are obvious benefits for your workforce. They see that you care. And it's incredibly important that as a business we show our drivers that we care about their health and well-being.
I know we touched on this just whilst we were catching up earlier, but for me, what I'm really interested is, as we sort of not quite wrap up our session, but wrap up some of our questions before we hand it over to the audience, is where do you see the evolution of this type of technology going? So from traditional telematics to the intelligence side through to video, what would you like to see happen, Daniel?
So I've already been talking to our partners at Lytx and Geotab about what this could actually mean for us. There is already plenty of technology out there which can tell us that there's a collision up ahead and we can avoid that. Our phones can do that as we speak. What I'd like to be able to see is that actually the telematics and the camera telematics systems will not only tell us what's going on immediately, but help us to update our route planning, our route risk assessments, our overall strategic plan that will help us to prevent our drivers from being in those situations where they're going to be exposed to that risk the next day. So, you know, we experienced an incident recently where there was a heavy fog bank. So I asked the team as part of the investigation, how many times in the past 12 months has there been a fog bank on that road? It was outside Barcelona. In the last 12 months, how many times, and how many times does that result in the collision? They didn't know. The data wasn't there. If we're utilizing this technology, that data could be coming back into our system and could be building up. And from everybody else who's got a camera, if we've got the Internet of Things, if that data is coming from every other vehicle and we're building up a picture of our road systems and much more effectively, then allowing that to help your route planning, your route risk assessment process, I see that as a huge win. I work with an organization called Together for Safer Roads, which is basically large fleet operators, mainly in the US, has to be fair, who are looking at ways of trying to reduce the risk for all road users globally. And one of the things they're looking at is, well, can we use this technology again to pick up hazardous roads which have potentially dangerous road furniture or structures or infrastructure that they could then go to authorities and say, actually, we know there's been X number of collisions as a result of this particular piece of road furniture. Can we get it moved? You know, there are so many ways that this technology can be used differently to what we're doing now. And I think it's incumbent on us as large organizations and small organizations to help you guys to understand what we need or we want, so you can then go out and deliver it for us.
Yeah, I think, and that's the point, we need to talk more to understand what is really important to you and then adapt our technology accordingly. I was listening to what you were just saying, and we've got 170,000 vehicles on a trial in the US that have all signed a waiver to say that anybody from that 170,000 can dial in and look out from the camera at the road conditions at any time. They don't know who the vehicle is, who the person is driving it, or the company. But if they hear or they see that there's a weather condition, for example, they can actually go in and look at what vehicles are in that vicinity at that particular time and see what is actually happening on the road 10 miles before one of their vehicles enters that red zone, if you like. So that type of capability is there. Now, it needs collaboration, and it needs people to overcome some of their privacy challenges, and it needs people to sign a few waivers and a few other things. But 170,000 vehicles is a significant trial, and it's really working well. And then you can actually dial in, see what's happening, and see whether actually the fog is cleared, perhaps. So there are things like that happening out there today. I think one point that was made earlier on, just to finish my point really, was that there's lots of technology out there, and I think one of the things that companies are talking about, and we spoke about it earlier, was to have that one view of everything that is happening. You're always going to have in your business, whether it's a small business or a multinational business, lots of different technology, and to know what you want to see and have the ability for each of those technologies to feed into that one pane of glass is really critical. Now, it's out there today. It's just, again, it takes collaboration from competitors to come together and actually start sharing data to allow companies such as PepsiCo to get what they need, which is a better view of the safety on the road.
Common goal and view of safety, so that co-opetition, really everybody working together, because
Totally right.
safer roads, obviously more improved efficiency, safety, everybody, as you mentioned before, Daniel, for us, we focus quite heavily on the driver. That's the most important technology in the vehicle, as Damien mentioned. But actually, it's anybody. It's anybody surrounding, anybody from other road users to vulnerable road users to it's that whole ecosystem. So anybody in that vicinity of the vehicle. So it's been a fantastic discussion so far, and thank you for the contributions from our panelists. But I appreciate we've covered a lot of ground, and now it's my turn to turn the floor over to you, our audience. So if you put your hand up, please let me know if you've got any questions. We'll get a microphone over to you. Let's start with this lady here.
Hello, I think I joined halfway, so I apologise if any of this has been covered. But I love it, going into AI. I'm in AI. I work for Psychiatry UK. But what I'm really interested in, as a mum who drives an EV and who's driven cars for a long time, what about the existing stuff we've got? Have we got the ability to have a child lock on a seatbelt? Now, it's all very well having child locks on the driver's door, but a 5-year-old like mine can quite easily release that at any point. Have we got an ability for kids to escape if they, God forbidden, and this has happened lots of times, another kid puts them in the boot. There's no, from what I understand, apart from a Japanese model, there's no ability, or no light where you can press a button to get yourself out of that boot. Might be wrong. Same with UV films. UVB can get through glass. So I drive a Porsche Taycan that doesn't have a cover. So that light's coming into my kids on my body. We know melanoma, in certain countries goes on long distance drives. My mum's got it actually. And it'll be the side that your arm is exposed. So all these kind of things that manufacturers at this moment, I love the fact that modern tech's going to help us, and my car does this sort of emergency stop, and even then I found out about that at the Porsche Interaction Centre. But why aren't we looking at the existing, improving the existing stuff to make it more sort of friendly for safety? And I just can't understand how these things haven't really...
Something you mentioned there in terms of this being a little bit more focused on manufacturers, I think is really key. There's some examples that you've given that are definitely manufacturer related, but bringing it back to safety technologies in the vehicle, is there anything that perhaps does relate back to either telematics? I think there's a lot of OEMs now starting to investigate this type of technology, so...
I think that the challenge is with OEMs, things take a long time to happen. But there is a lot of government initiatives happening now across Europe, and that includes the UK, looking at bringing this technology and enforcing it to be in place. Now, that's from our world, so we know about some safety technologies being brought in. New vehicles from, I think, mid this year have to have certain drowsy driving type technology, full stop, in them. So I think it comes down to probably some government initiatives to force the OEMs to bring out certain technology. The challenge is the government takes a long time to come up with the initiative, and then the OEM takes another few years to deliver it. And that is the reality, I think, is trying to produce some of these, sounds very simple things, but try and get them out to the market quickly. I don't know if anything you've got to...
Yeah, I think it double clicks on your point earlier, Damien, in terms of, I think technology can solve a lot of problems, but it takes the ecosystem of technology providers, OEMs, to work together and take the feedback from the market and implement those solutions. So I think it's a partnership-based thing.
Okay. To move on to someone else.
Any other questions in the room? We're just about hitting time. We've got one at the back. I think we can probably just about squeeze you in. Thank you. We're on our way now.
Thank you. Hiya. What top tips have you got for implementation of in-cab cameras and AI? There's lots of pushback from drivers, lots of nervousness. You talked a bit about rewards. That makes sense to me, but what other top tips have maybe you guys learned to try and push through that and get the buy-in?
Shall I go first? I think the key thing is understanding. There will be pushback because there's the concept that people think you're going to be observing them all the time. I don't care whether you've got 5 vehicles or 80,000 vehicles. I haven't got time to sit and watch those vehicles 24 hours a day. And I'm really not interested in doing that. The key is helping the drivers to understand what you're going to use that information for. So be very clear from the outset what you want to achieve from it. If you are looking to simply try and reduce road risk by doing X, Y, and Z, so we're going to be looking at distraction, we're going to be looking at speeding, we're going to be looking at harsh cornering, harsh braking. Those are the things we're going to focus on. We're going to let the system run for 3 months first, and it will give you warnings, but we'll do nothing with that. We want you to adapt your driving performance first. After 3 months, then we're going to start having conversations. Then we want you to start seeing you improving. We'll have the league tables. We'll help you to see where you perform against your colleagues. And if we need to go beyond that, then we're going to introduce some coaching, and we'll get some additional training in there. We'll help you to improve. The last thing that I would suggest you want to be looking at is formal disciplinary action, because that's going to put people off. If they think they're being watched to punish them, then it will be a non-starter. Go with the simple things. You're trying to reduce risk. You want them to get home safe. You want them to see their families that night. You want to help to protect everyone else on the road. Those are the messages you want to get across very clearly from the outset, because there is an innate fear in people that I'm being watched, and I'm in my workplace. You shouldn't be watching me. I don't want to watch you picking your nose. That's fine. But let's be serious about this. We're not doing this to watch you. We're doing this to protect everybody on the road and to reduce the risks that our business poses to itself and others.
Yeah, one way in which I've seen it work best is have drivers talking to drivers. So many times we've taken one of our existing customers and said, look, would you mind talking to, or getting one of your drivers who has found benefit in this solution, speaking to another set of drivers. So, very happy for us to share some names of people who will talk to you and say, look, I'll get drivers speaking to drivers and let them really tell you about what it's like and what it's not like. That's the best way to resolve those issues, I think.
Just as an add-on to that, one of the things that we've just started doing very recently is, I mentioned earlier on, we've got a defensive driving program called Test Drive, and we've started creating what we call Test Drive testimonials. So we're actually in our quarterly global newsletter, we'll have a driver discussing about when the technology or the defensive driving tips have helped him to avoid being involved in a major collision. And that's a real-world message, so it resonates with other drivers around the world who will see this newsletter.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. We're at time, and I'm conscious that there might be some other questions around the room that we didn't quite get to. So as I mentioned at the start, we will be available in the speakers area to the side outside the theatre straight after. So please feel free to meet with our panellists, continue the discussion there. I'd just like to thank you all for joining us today. It's been a packed session, and I hope you're walking away with some clear thoughts on how AI can help with making a difference to your fleets, no matter the size. A massive thank you to our phenomenal panel, whose insights and experiences have truly inspired the discussion today, making this seminar so engaging and informative. So let's take what we've learned today and think about how we can apply it. Making our roads safer and our operations more efficient is better for everyone. Thanks again for your time, and thank you for your contributions today. So let's keep pushing for safer and smarter fleets.